Thank you everyone for coming to our exciting launch of the MV2040. I'm truly excited. Before I start, my name is Helen Sui and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Moonee Valley City Council. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land in which we are located, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Moonee Nation, and pay respect to the spirits, ancestors, elders, and community members, past and present. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I do also want to acknowledge Moonee Valley municipality is a very diverse municipality and supported by diverse organizations. Very proud of that. Also would like to acknowledge the Moonee Valley councillors here this evening, our Mayor, Pierce Tyson. Councillor Ava Adams, maybe somewhere. Councillor Katrina Hodgson. Councillor Rose Isa. Councillor John Sapek. And our very special guest presenter, futurist Simon Warner. Our current MV2040 was adopted by Council in June 2018 and actually was started with community consultation in 2016. So that was, if 2016 to now, is almost 8 years ago. It's about the time we look at what the future holds for us, review that vision now, and what is a great opportunity. We're doing this in 2024, also when we're preparing also for the next council, ahead of our preparing for council plan. So tonight, we are about to kick off our program of community engagement for the MV2040 review, and very fascinating to see our fabulous community members so engaged. I know our event are sold out. Understanding our car park is absolutely full, so maybe still people making the way here depending how far away they have to park. My apologies. Really thank you for your support and enthusiasm in being part of this great event. And of course, tonight we'll have opportunity to have a glance into the future with our guest tonight, futurist Simon Warner. Before that, I would like to introduce our Mayor, Councillor Pierce Tyson, to say a few words.
Thank you, Helen, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out on what is becoming increasingly cold nights as we head into winter. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to spirits, ancestors, elders and community members. It's fantastic to see so many familiar faces tonight. Hey mate. This is really a critical piece of work that we're doing, as Helen said, and every good plan has touch points throughout it where we're reviewing it. And, you know, I can't think of anything really significant worldwide that's happened over the last 5 years that would prompt us to look at reviewing our plan. But nevertheless, we always need to be looking at what we can be doing better on behalf of our community. It's not just the beautiful buildings that we have, like the Flemington Hub that we're in today. It's not just that at council, it's all about what we're doing across the community, the schools, kinders, aged care, childcare, as well as the planning laws that we're looking at. Densification, obviously we're talking a lot at the moment about cost of living and housing. These are all the things that we're looking at across our city, across really Melbourne, but in Moonee Valley, in our neighbourhoods and our homes. A lot of community work and passion went into building MV2040, and we want to grab what's absolutely the best part of it and tinker around the edges and improve things where we need to. Tonight's our chance to identify what's worked well, what are some of the things that we can do better. It's an opportunity to recognise our community's resilience, particularly over the last few years, and a chance to peer into the future as we head towards 2040. Tonight's a night for insight and input. I think the whole point of what we're doing across the next 18 months is dialogue. It's not conversation, it's not monologue, it's not talking at our community, it's engaging in a two-way conversation, and we mean that genuinely. You'll find us at shopping centres, all through our services, engaging online, through our social media, through the letterbox as well. And it's really important while we're building that we're engaging properly with our community across all demographics, across all cross sections of our community to make sure that we're building the next iteration of our plan. Some of the things, even just to reflect over the last few years that we've achieved is obviously our Gerring Hub here, our Flemington Library, we're starting our Ascot Vale Library, we've got the Keilor East Leisure Centre, just to name a few things that are the big ticket items across MV2040. So now what I'll do is I'll hand back to Helen, or am I introducing Simon? Well, look, I'll introduce our fantastic futurist, Simon, and I can tell you that he said to me at the start of tonight, we won't be talking about potholes in people's streets, we won't be talking about cracked footpaths, we want to talk about the next 15, we want to talk about the next 40 and 100 years. Is that right, Simon? Well, I'll introduce Simon, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it, and thank you and engage fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. As Helen said, my name is Simon, and I am a futurist. And when I say that, I feel like I'm admitting I've got a problem, almost like it's the first step in a 7-step help program. And to be honest, a futurist is probably the most obtuse job title in the world. And whenever I introduce myself to people, I always wonder what they think when I say I'm a futurist. And so my therapist has said I should ask you. So when I say I'm a futurist, what do you guys think about? What does it make you think of? A planner. Okay, great. That's all right. I can handle a planner. Yeah, what else? Crystal ball. See, I think that that's what you're thinking. I think when I say I'm a futurist, you see this. Now, this is not a real photograph. This is what they call a deep fake. And you can tell it's a deep fake because that's a snow globe, and everyone knows you can't tell the future with a snow globe. Other than that, fairly accurate. That's how I spend my time at home. No, actually not at all. But I do think there's an assumption that futurism is some form of mysticism. And that's not really a fair reflection of actually what really goes on. So I studied futurism as part of a master's program back in Western Australia, and I actually spent a bit of time working as a corporate futurist at Rio Tinto. And now obviously when you work as a corporate futurist, you don't get a cool job title like corporate futurist. Instead they call you a specialist in scenario planning and strategy. But I have got better over the years at being able to explain to people what a futurist does. And I think what futurists are really good at is helping us find better answers to our big questions. To think our way through uncertainty and find better answers to big questions. And so when I was at Rio, the types of big questions we were answering was, what does the future demand for iron ore look like? And when you start to think about the complexity that goes into answering a question like that, it's really quite interesting. So it's everything from, what's the geopolitical situation in Brazil going to be, because that's where Rio's main competitors outside Australia are based, or we might think about demographic shifts in China, or changes in smelting technology that fundamentally change the composition of iron ore you can put through a smelter. It's all this stuff comes together, geological data throughout the Pilbara, to kind of develop these plans, and these plans would then shape billion-dollar investment decisions about where and when to build the next mine site. Now, I'm not suggesting that your questions are quite that big, but I think we all have our version of a big question. And what I'd like to start with today is to give you guys a chance just to talk about what your big question is. So if there was one big question you had about the future that was not what's Saturday's lotto numbers, what would it be? So I want you to take a moment just to turn with the person next to you. If you find that you're not next to somebody, now would be a great opportunity to be next to somebody, because there'll be a couple of opportunities like this through the session to talk. So just have a quick chat with the person next to you. What is one of the big questions that you have about the future of Moonee Valley? Okay, let's bring this conversation back in. Great though that you have so many questions. This is fantastic. Before I go any further, I do feel there's one person who was not introduced this evening. Over here on the little table, this is Sarah Firth. Everyone say hi to Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah's our graphic recorder. I don't know if you can see on the other screen over there, but she's actually going to record this session live and actually create a visual representation of the conversation and stuff that we're having. But curious, what are some of the big questions you guys had? Who heard a good question in that little breakout session then? Who's got a question? Oh, excellent. Who had a great question? Yes. Let's write that down. Fix be in the future. Cool. Anyone else got a question? Where will we park all the cars? Great. Anyone else? There's another one over there, yeah? Sorry, yep. No, you got it? So how will we live better? Or how will we use space more efficiently? Yeah, okay. How will we use space more efficiently? Great. Is there anything over here? A lot over there. It must have been. I heard conversation going on, so there must have been something. Yes. What will the weather be like? Okay. Over the front here. Yeah, how do we create social cohesion? Is it okay if I just... Or social justice, you choose? How do we create care within our community? Yep. Create, okay. That's all right, care and justice. Okay, I think I've got room for one more before my legs give out. Was there something in the middle? Yes.
All right. So representing small businesses, what will small businesses be able to contribute to the Moonee Valley area, and also how will we be able to support each other, small business council and things like that, be able to support small businesses?
Cool. Obviously, given this much space left, have you got a slightly, which side, can I do one? Can I do the first one? What is it that small business can contribute? Is that, I like that. It's a beautiful question. Yeah, cool. That's right. So I've got, how will SMEs, so small medium-sized enterprises, support and be supported by Moonee Valley? That's all right, I'm a professional. That's all right. Hey, thank you all, this is brilliant. But these are exactly the types of questions. And as a futurist, I love questions. In fact, what we really want more than anything is a great question. We want a great question to guide the conversations that we're going to have. I kind of think about almost like a great question's almost been like the constellations that guide our journey. It's almost like a North Star, except that we're in the Southern Hemisphere. And over the next 18 months, we need a question that's going to guide us in these conversations that we have. And when we think about trying to get that question right, it's really important that we it's not too big, it's not too small, it's kind of just right. And to kind of demonstrate how important a great question is, I'm going to share 2 photos with you. These 2 photos are exactly the same event. They're both of the 2021 New South Wales floods. The first of these photos, the one on the left is taken by NASA. The second one, the one on the right, is taken by a photojournalist. Her name is Natalie Grollo, and she actually won a Walkley Award for photojournalism for this photo. It's called Peter Takes a Rest. Now, have a quick scan. Anyone notice any difference between the 2 photos? One's micro, one's macro. Well, yes, close. I think definitely one is macro. I'm not sure one is quite micro. Yeah. One's scientific, one's personal. Yeah. Yeah, I think a really good question is one that matters to us, that has meaning attached to it. Something that we actually are willing to spend our time and our energy to investigate collectively. And I think the other thing about it, which was kind of touched on over here, is about kind of getting the framing right. I think the framing of a good question is where you want enough context that you can understand what's going on, but not so much information that you can't answer any questions with it. There's another thing about a good question that's also really important when you talk about this from a futurist perspective, and that is the dimension of time. And so this is this concept of what we call the cone of all possible futures. So if you think about it, here we are in the present today, and if we kind of go 5 minutes into the future, how many different futures can we possibly imagine? And it may feel like it's near infinite number of futures, but actually it's a small subset of the total number of possible futures 5 years from now, or 50 years from now. So as we go out into the future, the number of possible futures goes up. So we've got to try and find this kind of sweet spot when we start to think about the future, where it's far enough out that it feels distinctly different from today, but not so far out that we can't imagine it and it's irrelevant for the decisions that we're making. And there's an interesting thing within futurism, and you ask a futurist how far away the future is always at least 7 years away. For exactly that reason, because if I ask you what's the future look like next week or even next year, it's really hard to separate a future that's 1 year from now than what we're experiencing today. It's really hard to get out of the conversations around potholes and cracks in the pavement. But if we start to think about what's 15 years out, we start about what's Moonee Valley in 2040 and beyond, well, that's actually something that opens up a world of new possibilities to us. And so what I've done is I've worked with a couple of people within Moonee Valley, and we've shaped a question. And this is our big question that we're going to be focusing on both tonight and into the future. This is our kind of North Star. So how will we ensure Moonee Valley is a great place to live, work and visit in 2040 and beyond? And if anyone has actually read the community vision, you'll notice that this looks very, very familiar. And I assume that a lot of work and effort went into shaping that vision for the future as being something that is very representative of what the community wants and needs. And so I want you to keep this in mind today, because this is going to be the question that I'm going to ask you to collaborate on as part of our work this evening and over the next week or so. One of the challenges, though, that we have when we come to answering these types of questions, what does Moonee Valley look like in 2040 and beyond, is that there's a lot of uncertainty around it. In fact, we get told that we live in unprecedentedly uncertain times. But do we? Who thinks that we genuinely live in unprecedentedly uncertain times, and who thinks it could just be the immediacy bias? So immediacy bias says the things that are happening to us now feel more real than the things that happened to us in the past. So if we were to look back and think about other periods of uncertainty that we've gone through in recent history, so we could look at things like, like the SARS pandemic or the Iraq War, or anyone here remember the Y2K bug? Right. How do you reckon this stacks up? Do you reckon it's genuinely more uncertain now, or it's immediacy bias? So hands up if you think it's definitely more uncertain now than it has been in the past. Put up proud, like me. Come here, yeah. And who thinks that it's immediacy bias? And who's not going to put up their hand regardless of what I ask? Okay, about a third. Interestingly enough, there has actually been data collected on this over the last 30 years by the International Monetary Fund. And this is what they call the World Uncertainty Index. And they've been tracking uncertainty since the 1990s. And what we can see, it actually tracks quite well against things like the Iraq War. And you can see here, that's the US fiscal cliff. in 2011, and that's COVID. And the uptick at the end you can see is actually the start of the war in the Ukraine. And then over the top of that, what I've overlaid is a 3-year moving average. And so for a lot of organisations, I know within local government it's actually 4 years, but for a lot of organisations, their 3 years is how often they revisit their strategic planning. And so in some ways, what that yellow line represents is the level of uncertainty that we're both planning in and the level of uncertainty that we're planning for. And as you can see, there's actually significantly more uncertainty around than there has been sometimes in the past. And I think what that means is we actually need to take some distinctly different approaches to how we think about the future. It's really hard for us to be really clear about what the future looks like in 2040. Any futurist that tells you the answer is lying to you. What we want instead is we want a method for searching through uncertainty and finding better answers to the questions that we have. And so what I want to do tonight is I want to give you a few of the tools and techniques that futurists use to help answer these types of questions, to help explore this space. So what we're going to do as a starting point is I want you to take a question. It can be one of these questions that we clutched up here on the board. It could be one of the questions that you talked about with the person next to you. It could be the big question that's guiding our conversation. But I want you to imagine that all of the uncertainty around that question is inside this box. And the dimensions of the box are shaped by 3 things. The first of those things, the length of the box, is time. So over what time frame are we looking at this stuff? Because the longer the time frame, the greater the uncertainty. The second thing I want you to think about is the width of the box as representing the level of complexity around that question. How many moving parts are there? How many different people are involved? Who gets to have a say? And again, the greater the complexity, the greater the uncertainty. And finally, I want you to think about the height of the box, and the height of the box is about control. Or more specifically, it's about a lack of control. Because the less control we have, the greater the uncertainty we face. And I think that when we start to think about uncertainty through this type of lens, we actually realise that we face far more uncertainty than we might like otherwise to admit. A lot of the challenges that we face around demographic shifts, ageing populations, loneliness in the community, climate change, a lot of these things are hugely complex and also largely outside our control. We get to control our response. We don't get to control whether these impact our community. But the good news is, somewhere inside that box is the perfect solution to our question, the perfect answer. All we need is a method for searching through the box to find it. But this is where we kind of come up with some really interesting challenges, is that if we were to actually search through that box and find solutions, there's a very good chance that the solution that we think looks the best is actually the least appropriate. And the solution we're really looking for doesn't look like anything at all. I'll share this example of Blockbuster. So anyone remember Blockbuster? So in the year 2000, the founders of Netflix walked in and had a meeting with the CEO and the executive team at Blockbuster, and they offered to sell themselves to Blockbuster for $50 million US. Why $50 million? Because that was every dollar they'd put into the business since it started. They just want their money back. They just want it out. And they got laughed out of the boardroom. And over the next few years, the exec team at Blockbuster would have been very sure that they made exactly the right decision, because the Blockbuster share price kept going up and Netflix failed to actually raise any money. It wasn't until 2003 that they finally went for an IPO and they raised $84 million US on the stock exchange in New York. By 2010, Blockbuster had gone into administration. By 2020, there was only one Blockbuster store left in the world, somewhat ironically because of a Netflix special called The Last Blockbuster on Earth. And all it was doing was selling Blockbuster merchandise. And then as of this year, Netflix is worth $163 billion US. And when we look at this story, there's so many things we can learn about it. But one of it is that when Blockbuster looked at Netflix, they couldn't understand it because the perfect solution to the future just didn't look like the past. very easy to think that what worked well in the past will continue to work well in the future. We've got a business model that's successful. We've got to keep doing that business model. And I think this is one of the really interesting challenges for local government. There's some stuff that we have done that has made us very successful in the past. But we just can't be sure that they're the same things that will make us successful in the future. The services that we provide our community that people have loved in the past may be not the things that they love in the future. The way that we engage with people in the past may be not the way they want to be engaged with in the future. And so as a futurist, we need to be willing to question these things. But questioning these things doesn't come easy. And I'm going to prove that to you using maths. Because everyone loves maths, yeah? Right, good. So let's do some maths. So what's going to happen here is we're going to play a little game. I'm going to give you guys a maths question, and you're going to do the question in your head. So no smart devices, no smartphones, watches, shoes, or anything like that. And not even dumb devices, so no pens or paper. This is a purely mental exercise. Is everyone ready? First one to shout out the answer gets a book. There you are. Make it worthwhile for you. Got something at stake. So the question I'm going to give you is, what is 63 times 258? Go. Now, I want you to think and just notice what your brains did when I asked you that question. Helen was like, whose brains just immediately gave up and waited for somebody else to answer? Right? Cool. This is, by the way, a perfectly logical reaction, a perfectly fundamental reaction. Our brains are wired to conserve energy at all cost. And what that means is we'll avoid doing the deep work and the hard thinking if we can. And if I'd asked you a different question, if I'd asked you what's 3 times 12, you would have said 36, because our fast brain, the brain that conserves energy, is really, really good at seeing patterns from the past and repeating them in the future. What it's very bad at is dealing with novel information and novel problems and novel challenges. For that, we need to engage what we call the deep brain, or the slow thinking brain. And everyone read Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow? One of the godfathers or grandfathers of behavioural economics, who sadly died actually only a few weeks ago. But he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and he talks about our fast brain and our slow brain. And if we want to deal with and process novel information, we actually need to engage our slow brain. So I'm going to give you the same question again, and this time I actually really want you to do the question. Okay? That's incorrect. So what do we do now? Same question again. What's 63 times 258? And I want you to notice what your brains do this time. You notice that when they did this the second time, that if you try and do that question in your brain, it takes all of your mental energy. You can't be doing anything else while you're doing that question. You can't, for instance, be operating in an open plan office with people asking you questions. It's actually really hard in our modern world to find time to engage our deep thinking brain. We actually have to take time out to do this type of work. Yet that's the only type of thinking that will allow us to imagine what the future could be like that's different from today. And so one of the things I'm going to give you at the end of tonight is I'm going to give you an activity that I want you to participate in. And as part of that exercise, I would love for you to spend 20 minutes of deep thinking. 20 minutes of imagining how the future could be different from today. But even beyond this, whenever you have a novel problem that you need to solve, you need to find a time and a space and a place to be able to do the deep thinking. Otherwise, all you'll do is find solutions that look just like the past. The second thing I want to share with you about kind of the mindset of futurism is a somewhat embarrassing story for me. In 2017, I got invited to venture into the mountains outside of Queenstown. And we were going to hike a place called the Gillespie Pass. And so you kind of climb up over this pass, about 1.5 kilometres high. And I was going with 7 of my really good friends. And the day before I was meant to go, I dove into a swimming pool, hit my head on the bottom, and then cracked 2 vertebrae in my spine. And I was like, it'll be fine, it'll be good. And my wife was like, you need to go and see a doctor. The doctors insisted I get an x-ray. The x-ray said, you've got 2 cracked vertebrae in your spine. And I've gone back to the doctor, and the doctor's like, you really shouldn't go. And I was like, oh, I was really going to say I can't go. But you're saying I shouldn't go. I'm taking that as a yes. I'm off. And I've gone back to my wife and said, don't worry, the doctor said I can go. And I then kind of got on a plane. I flew into Queenstown the next morning with my pack and stuff like that. Just for a moment, maybe you guys want to put your futurist hats on. Who could imagine what could possibly go wrong next, or happen next? Sorry? Everything could be fine. That is one possible future, yeah, for me in this moment in time. Anything else? I could be in a great deal of pain, yes. 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 Yeah, so you're backing up the pain thing. Yeah, fair enough. Anything else over there? I could have had a very expensive helicopter ride off a mountain because I've spoken to some lawyers about this, and apparently I would not have been covered by health insurance. Do you know what, Helen? I don't even know the answer.
She's wrong.
Yeah, but I am wondering whether you've listened to anything I've said since then. So anyway, what actually did happen was the first day we were kind of hiking along the flats, and the pain, it was my pain in my back kind of started moving down into my kind of leg, into my right leg. By the time we started to climb the next day, I actually couldn't physically lift my right leg by itself. I had to lift it with my hands and stick into footholds and climb the mountain. That's why I'm right down the bottom there, and that's the rest of it. I was waiting for me at the top. We managed to make it to the summit. I thought I was okay because I thought going down is relatively easy because all you got to do is literally swing your leg out and land on it. You can kind of push off it again. But it turns out that when you go down a mountain, you don't just go down. You kind of go down and you go up a bit and you go down again. And about 3/4 of the way into that day, I literally was in so much pain, I just dropped my pack on the path, and I did myself another injury to my ego when I had to get everyone else to carry my stuff off the mountain. What I think is really interesting, though, about this story, apart from complete embarrassment for me, is would I have made the same decision if I had pre-thought the possible consequences? So instead of in the moment when I was so engaged and wanting to go, if a week before someone had said to me, hey, if you did a serious injury one day before you went on that hike, would you still go? Like if you were going to go and you could put yourself in danger and your friends in danger, would you still go? And I'd be like, of course I'm not going to go. That's ridiculous. But this is a really interesting story when you start to think about the future. The future is a great place for us to have difficult conversations about what happens next, about what we want and what is meaningful and matters to us. Because even futurists don't think about the future in the moment. We need to find the right space and create the conditions. And what I think is so beautiful about this journey that we're about to embark on is we've got 18 months to do this thinking, 18 months to do this planning, 18 months to hear people's input. And it's only because we've given ourselves that space that we can actually come up with really good outcomes. Another thing that futurists spend a lot of time doing is what we call scanning for the environment. And so scanning the environment, I always think about it through this lens of like the captain on the bridge of a ship, looking out towards the horizon, looking for danger. And the reason I think like this is because I spent my youth growing up on fishing boats. So my dad was a professional fisherman. Actually, my dad's here tonight. He's the one who shouted out before at the back. Everyone say hello to my dad. That's Gil. Hi, Gil. He just happens to be over here from Perth at the moment, so I invited him along tonight just so I could embarrass him in this moment. No, but I did spend a lot of time on fishing boats and on boats when I was growing up. And there's one particular story I remember with my dad. We did a Sydney to Hobart yacht race 20 years ago this year in 2004. And it was one of the 2 or 3 worst weather conditions I've ever had on Sydney to Hobart. And the year that we were in the race, less than half the fleet made it to Hobart. And I remember being on watch on the first night, and it was maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. And the weather conditions were already deteriorating a fair bit. And even though Dad wasn't meant to be on watch, he would come upstairs every half an hour and he would kind of look around the horizon, he would check the radar, check the ropes, the sails, go downstairs, sleep for 25 minutes and come up and do it again. And did it all night. And there's this idea of like in times of uncertainty, we need to spend more time scanning to see what's coming next. And it's really challenging because I know right now there are so many things that we're dealing with in the moment. as was kind of pointed out earlier on, there's things like the cost of living pressures. There are, issues around job security and loneliness and community divisiveness and all these things that we're dealing with right now. But the problem is we can be so focused on what's happening now that we stop to look up and see what's coming next. But every challenge we're dealing with now was once a distant blip on the horizon that we could have seen it coming. We could have tracked it and watched it and been more prepared for it. And so even though we find ourselves in what feels like a really challenging period of time right now, we still need to make sure that we look out to see what's coming next. And this is the exercise that I want you guys to participate in. At the end of tonight, I'm going to ask you to see what are the signals that you see that indicate how the future of Moonee Valley could be different from today. So I think of a signal as being the things that make us go, You know the CNC Music Factory song from the 1990s? Yeah, things that make us go, So what our brains are very, very good at is identifying novelty in our environment, because novelty is possibly a sign of danger. So when we scan the environment, we say something that sticks out and we go, I wonder what that means. That's a signal of how the future might be different from today. I love signals. I collect signals. I actually turn them into packs of cards like this and I use them in workshops and things. But I chose one of the signals for you guys tonight to share with you to give us a bit of an example. And this is the example I found. This is a true news article, and it says, New York State buys robots for lonely elders. There's a QR code there if you want, and you can scan it. You can actually go straight to the news article. But this is a true news story. New York State has actually bought 800 of these robots for lonely elders in their area. This is called the LEQ, and it's produced by a company called Intuition Robotics. And so these little robots that sit on your counter, and you can have conversations with them. They can give you advice around what exercises to do. They can teach you to take your medication if you need them to. And if you're just lonely, they'll have a talk to you. Things that make you go, Yeah? So, as I said, this is a true news article. This is one of the signals I've collected about how the future could be different from today. The next part, though, as a futurist, you don't just look at the single and stop with the bit that makes you go, You want to understand the bit that makes you go, Like, what does it mean? What's the driver behind this change? Why is it that New York State is buying robots for lonely elders? And as we're probably aware, we have a real issue already within our community around loneliness, especially in older members of the community. And when we look at demographic trends, it's likely that those challenges are only going to be exacerbated over the next 10 to 15 years. So one of the drivers of this is an ageing population and people living away from their nuclear family. Another driver of this change, though, has been improvements in things like artificial intelligence that now allow us to produce an item like this at just $350 plus $30 a month as a subscription service. Not that I've got one, but if you wanted one, that's how much it would cost. So suddenly, a type of technology that was almost inconceivable just a decade ago can be had for less than $500, as a purchase price. Things that make you go, So, this is what I'm going to get you guys to do. I want you to, in a second, I want you guys to have a little moment and think about what is a signal that you have seen recently. It could be a news article or a blog post or something you heard on the news. It could be a conversation you had with somebody. I just want you to think about just one signal that you've seen recently, something that made you go, something that makes you think about how the future might be different from today. I want you to keep in mind this is this idea of scan the environment, the radar that's going around on the boat. And when we think about these signals, it's interesting when we talk about the future, we talk about as futurists the difference between the preferred future, the probable future, and the possible future. So often we have the preferred future, the one that we'd like to happen, and often when we do strategic planning, that's the only future we imagine. We're playing for that, notwithstanding the fact that so much of the future is outside our control. So we want to have a bigger lens, we look at the probable future, the things that are likely to happen. But of all the things that have happened to us recently, the things that really kind of challenged us in our community, probably weren't probable things. I don't think the pandemic was probable. I don't think we would listed the floods as probable. If we had, we probably would have planned for them a bit better. The probable things are things we probably already have plans for. What surprises us is the possible things. And as futurists, we're really interested in the possible. So I want you to think about that for a moment. I want you to take a moment, first of all, by yourself. Just give yourself 30 seconds to a minute, just by yourself. What is one signal that you've seen recently? Something that made you go, Something that indicates how the future for Moonee Valley might be different from today. And then, after you've kind of had something, I want you to share with the person next to you. What is one signal that indicates Moonee Valley's future? Have a chat with the person next to you. What have you seen that indicates how the future might be different from today? Yeah, but so take that idea, right? But what about it has surprised you? What was something that you saw that you kind of go, oh, wow. Oh, I didn't think it could do that.
As in?
Like with the AI. Yeah.
GPT, and I guess, IT, so you see a lot of those.
Yeah.
In the Microsoft space, there's all this whole new Copilot technology, which are sort of things you do as a security analyst now they can do automatically when you ask a natural language question. I wonder how many analysts will be freed up.
Yeah.
Sort of things, or even like AI things with Grammarly, like you write a thing and you see Grammarly correctly.
Yeah.
Sometimes look, you still be like bullshit detector on or vet what it gives you, but it gives you, I guess, your answers you would have thought of.
Yeah.
Possibilities you would have imagined, and you sort of get a hybrid view, but over time, as it
So what I thought was really interesting, the signal around AI has been the conversation shifted really quickly from we're concerned about students using AI to write their papers to now we're concerned about teachers using AI to mark them. And we've got now AI grading AI. It's like,
and is that I was at the security conference last year and I had to get some of the things that get around the deep fakes.
yeah.
Yes, the watching, as you said.
Yeah.
And it's not just that. These real Gaza figures with AI things back then, it's just we sort of bad mistakes that happen there in AI.
Very interesting. Good. Okay. What a great bunch of futurists we have here. You guys are all out there spotting signals already. This is brilliant. Curious, who heard something interesting then that they didn't know before? Over there. What did you hear that you'd never heard before? Tesla, driverless, car share. Yeah, right. Cool. Anyone else hear something that surprised them? There's something over here. I thought I saw a hand. People not so sure yet. I'm a professional. I can outweight you.
We were discussing the impacts of wind in the northwest region, talking about Docklands to begin with, and now the buildings that are going up in Wall Street, Moonee Ponds, and the wind tunnel that's happening through there.
So the creation of wind tunnels. I thought you were telling them that we're now putting the wind turbine in the tunnel and...
Not yet.
Not yet, that's next.
Although,
Yes, makes sense. We funnel the wind in, then we capture it.
there you go, there's a use for the document.
Yeah.
As a past resident.
But yes, I was actually in New York last year, and you do see that as the buildings keep getting bigger, those wind tunnel effects become stronger. And already I notice, I'm from Perth originally, and when you come to Melbourne, you hear that as a conversation that you don't hear in Perth about the wind tunnel effect that happens in the city. And you go, yeah, what happens when the average building is 20% taller than it is now? What does that mean? Interesting. Things that make you go, Was there something like, oh yeah, over here. Yeah. Yeah, that's you. Oh, wow. So alternative schooling. Anything else? Yeah, I think it'd be inappropriate to have a conversation about the future and not talk about AI. So thank you very much. AI changing work.
Also, how we spend time, like if people are not working, what are we going to do with our free time?
Yeah, what will we do with free time? Anyone else found a signal that they heard about the future? Yep.
We talked about housing density, but also cars, and they were sort of interrelated. Like, it's a common complaint in my local area that there's not enough parking because houses that were like it's a single block are now 2 or 3 units, small garages that cars can't fit into, and but also from a business and shopping precinct perspective, Keilor Road in Nidri, for example, it's a common complaint that there's not enough car parks, but also council recently done some analysis on the use of parking, which suggests that there are plenty of car parks. It's just they're a little bit further away from the shops, and potentially people are going to walk to their shops to get there. So it's, I think car usage is going to have to change from that sort of thing.
Yeah, and there's obviously the Tesla driverless car share stuff that's happening, which is great. One of the things I also heard recently that made me go, is that I met some friends. I used to live around Northcote and around that area. And in a lot of those areas, I'm assuming it's similar here, where there's sometimes no off-street parking, so people are forced to park on the street. And when you have electric cars, you therefore can't charge your car at home. And then the problem is everybody's trying to charge their car on Saturday morning. And so everyone's kind of competing to find places to charge their cars because we don't actually have the home infrastructure to do the charging with. And I thought, that made me go, One last one we got to add to our signals of the future. Something that indicates how the future might be different from today, yeah.
Addiction to internet.
Yeah.
And the disputing on what truth is.
Well, I feel like they're two separate ones. Yeah.
You need to be down into the whole.
Yeah, but I do think there's another thing. I think there's a technology addiction piece. I was always surprised. One of the things that years ago, one of the things that made me go, was the fact that Candy Crush Saga, remember Candy Crush? Yeah. Employed people from the gambling industry to make the game more addictive. And I was like, right? And I was like, we have an asymmetrical issue there in terms of technology companies having the tools to make technology more addictive. So technology addiction, yes. And what was the other thing you said? Addiction? Yes. Yes. Civic democratic engagement. And no one has said climate yet. Yeah. So interesting. So these are brilliant, by the way. What most of these are, like this one here is actually a signal. All these are drivers. Like these are the underlying things that we're seeing change. But what we want to see is, well, what's the signal? What's the news article or the event that happened? So I think the flooding events, obviously you had your own flooding events, but then what we've seen since your flood in 2022, in the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen other towns have their own flooding events, and you kind of go, how long is it before we get our next one? So the flooding event that you're seeing elsewhere is the signal of the climate change or the changing. So when we talk about climate change, it's actually just even changed into precipitation patterns. So we may get less often higher density rainfall, and when we get that type of rainfall, that's what the rivers can't handle, and we suddenly get flooding events on a more irregular basis. So this is what I want to do. This is actually going to be your homework, so to speak, and it's the first part of how we do this engagement together over the next 18 months. Is at the end of this, I'm going to share a little QR code. I know a link is also going to be sent around after this session. I'm all going to ask you to participate in an environmental scan. I want you to share 5 to 10 signals that you find in the world around you that indicate how the future of Moonee Valley could be different for today. We're going to use those signals to actually shape stories about Moonee Valley's future and use that as a way of being able to identify strategic options as well as the challenges and opportunities we might face. Before we get to that, though, I want to share a couple of quick little things with you. I know we're almost out of time. I want to share with you briefly one of the greatest future forecasts ever made. Shout out if you know what this is.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
John raised his hand as soon as the image went on the screen, and then I think it got shouted out here within about 3 seconds. So everyone knows 2001, A Space Odyssey? Yeah, great. It's incredible. It is not just an incredible movie, it's an incredible future forecast. And this was actually released in 1968, so it's now 56 years ago. It was written by Stanley Kubrick with the help of Arthur C. Clarke. And what was really special about this as a future forecast is a number of things that are actually imagined into existence. So before this movie, we had never seen seatback entertainment in an aircraft. We'd never seen flat screen TVs. We'd never seen mobile phones. We'd never seen video conferencing. We'd never seen voice-activated computing. Like all these things were almost imagined into existence for the first time in this movie. And then I shared this with you because I think that this is actually the power of futurism. The power of futurism is allowing us to imagine into existence a future for Moonee Valley that we may not otherwise get. We may not get to control the catalyst, but we get to control our response. We get to create things, better things, than maybe we have in the present. There's a beautiful kind of law within futurism called Dator's law. And it was produced by a guy named Jim Dator, who's a futurist. And he says that any useful idea about the future must at first appear ridiculous. I encourage you, especially early on in this journey that we're on together, early on, lean into ridiculous. Lean into stretching our thinking. Lean into possibility over probability. There'll be times in the future where we have to narrow it back down again, that we'll have to converge all our possible ideas and choose which ones we're going to pursue, but that's not now. That's probably some 12 months in, right? We've got time to be ridiculous. And I encourage us to be so because we will actually create better futures if we approach it that way. And now, I need one more thing, and I say it's only fair that given I shared one of the greatest future forecasts ever made, I'll also share one of the worst ones. This future forecast was made in 2002. And this was a briefing by the US intelligence agency to the US House and Senate. And in they stated that we judge that Iraq has continued its weapons of mass destruction program in defiance of US resolutions and restrictions. Baghdad has chemical and biological weapons, as well as missiles with ranges in excess of UN restrictions. If left unchecked, it probably will have a nuclear weapon during this decade. This was the response from an agency or a community with an annual budget of $50 billion and 20,000 intelligence analysts. And what was so wrong about it was not just in the possibility there was no possibility of it being wrong, in the way that it's phrased, there's no possibility of it being wrong, but the consequences of that prediction, of that forecast, were significant. There was tens of thousands of lives lost. There was trillions of dollars blown up in a desert, and the US's political reputation left in tatters. And the only reason I share this with you is because at the end of this, some interesting stuff came out of it. So after the war ended in 2008, the US intelligence community started to think about how could they have got it so wrong. And they agreed to a series of forecasting competitions with public organisations. So what they would do is they read a competition, they'd get a group of people to make predictions about the future. And they would compete against civilian organisations. So one of these organisations was a group called the Good Judgment Project, run out of the University of Pennsylvania. And they got a couple of hundred ordinary people. And they asked them to start making predictions. The type of predictions you have to make was, what's the wheat price going to be like 3 months from now? Who's going to win the next French presidential election? Who's going to be the new mayor of Moonee Valley? I don't know if they asked that one specifically, but they asked them a series of questions, and then people started making judgments and predictions. And what they did is out of those 200 people, they found 20%, about 40 of them. And what they were looking for was the people who made the most accurate predictions, but also the people who updated their predictions the most often. And what they did is they skewed the 200 responses towards those 40 people, but they included everybody. And they took the average prediction of this new model, and then they stretched it a little bit. So if the group said the prediction is 90% chance of something happening, make 100. If it was 10, make it 0. When they did that, this group of 200 ordinary civilians off the street, without access to classified information, outpredicted the US intelligence community by 30%. A US intelligence community with 20,000 people and a $50 billion budget with access to classified information was beaten by civilians by 30%. Now, I think there's some beautiful lessons in that for us, because we're just ordinary civilians. And one of the things that really is really powerful about this story is what they realize afterwards, that inside those types of organizations, we often get a high level of groupthink. We hire people who are just like us. We do what the boss says. Our strength, our greatest strength, is in our diversity. Our greatest strength is in our diversity. The more diversity input into your strategic planning process, the better your plan will be. The more diverse your input into the environmental scan we're about to undertake, the better the scan will be, the better the options we'll identify. So I genuinely encourage you over the next 18 months to be deeply involved in this process. Your diversity is Moonee Valley's strength. So I know we are a little bit over time and we're about to wrap things up, but as I said, there will be an environmental scan that opens as of today. I believe after this session, there's a QR code. You can scan it right now and go, damn it, I just can't wait. I want to get started. Otherwise, I believe after this session, everyone who was a participant tonight will be sent an email with a link, and in that link is the opportunity to participate in this scan. It's only open for 1 week. I would encourage you to do it sooner rather than later, because it's more likely that if you put it off, you'll forget. But your input matters, because that diversity is our strength. Beyond that, by want of being here tonight, you'll also be given invitations to participate in other aspects of this strategy refresh over the next 18 months, and I strongly encourage you to participate where you can, because that diversity is our strength. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is that you may have some questions, and we have a bit of a tight schedule today, and so what we would like you to do is on every seat, there is a little card like this where you can write your questions. Now, I can imagine you might have some different types of questions. If you have questions about the process and what's going to happen over the next 18 months, just write it down, and that's going to help Melissa and the team who are running this process. It'll help them understand what's the information you need, how you want to be communicated with. So if you have any questions about the strategy refresh process, drop it on there. If you want to be contacted directly, you can put your contact details as well. If you have something that's a bit more specific around what's going on in your council area, again, please feel free to drop it onto this thing, onto this little card. Again, put your name and contact details if you want to be contacted about it. If you just have a general question about like futurism and what the lotto numbers on Saturday are going to be, I'll be hanging around a little bit afterwards, and I'm welcome to have a chat with you. But for now, I would just like to say thank you so much. I think it's absolutely incredible that we had such an amazing attendance on such short notice. Like the only invitations I think went out for this only about 3 weeks ago, and I think it's a true reflection of what a beautiful, engaged community there is in Moonee Valley. I really do thank you for your participation, and I hope to see you all again in the future.
Thank you, Simon. I'm sure you have done Neil and Cheryl very proud tonight. Aren't we all engaged and stimulated, and got me lost in my thoughts trying to work out your math. What a mistake. Thank you. And also thank you, Sarah, for your beautiful graphic recording. I wish I had any of those skills. They look fabulous. I will go closer to read. And to everyone here, really, really thank you for being here. And also, can I please plead, continue stay tuned and continue to participate. This is the beginning of our exciting journey. We do want to make sure our review, our vision review, MV2040 review, is actually done together with and for our community. So that's really a genuine invitation from me and from our mayor and councillors. Really please do stay. Keep your enthusiasm and keep putting your ideas. There's no wild idea, there's no bad idea. We really want to, as Simon says, please put your contact detail, your question, comments, and we have our very helpful staff here if you want to ask questions or how you continue to participate. And also, I do want to thank our wonderful team for making this happen, as Simon said, in a very short period of time. And we are a very diverse organization working with and for a very diverse community. As Simon said, diversity is a goal, not quite your word, but I'm sure you mean that. And please continue to put your diversity of thoughts. We need it. We need you working together with us to build the future together for ourselves, for our parents, for our children. And please continue to engage your family, your children, your neighbors to participate. We want everyone of the community have opportunity to participate and have a say. Thank you.